everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at a book called TechGnosis.
TechGnosis. Myth, magic, and mysticism in the age of information, to be exact.
Oh, right, the full title. I always forget the whole thing. So this book is by Erik Davis.
Yeah. And in it, he explores some pretty wild connections between technology, ancient myths, and like the evolution of human consciousness.
Yeah, the connections he makes in this book are fascinating. So to kick things off, Davis starts by introducing this figure called Hermes Trismegistus.
Oh yeah, Hermes Trismegistus. So he represents this ancient idea of technology being a kind of magic.
And what's crazy is that people actually believed Hermes was a real person.
I know, right? Like well into the age of reason.
Yeah.
When, reason and science were supposedly everything. But people still thought this mythical figure who kind of blurred the lines between magic and tech was real.
It just goes to show you how intertwined those ideas were, even as late as the Enlightenment. So the question is, do we still see technology as magical today?
That's a good question. Even if we don't use the word magic anymore.
Right. Davis argues that even something as commonplace as, like, writing can be seen through that lens.
Writing.
Yeah. We totally take it for granted. But how is it magical?
Okay, think about it this way. Abstract symbols on a page, they can conjure sounds and meaning in our minds. It's kind of like an incantation, bringing words to life.
It's true. I mean, Davis even shares this anecdote from David Abram, where he compares reading to, like, a Zuni elder hearing a cactus speak.
It's a powerful image, right?
Totally. It shows how we engage with the written word, like it has this animistic power.
And that power, it's shaped us in profound ways. I mean, Walter Ong said, and Davis quotes him in the book, more than any other single invention, writing has transformed human consciousness.
Whoa, so what kind of transformations are we talking about? Like, what has writing done to our minds?
Well, for one, it let us externalize our thoughts, our memories. And that freed up mental space for more complex thinking.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then it also enabled us to communicate across, like, time and space, connecting us in ways that were never possible before. But on the flip side, it also introduced this level of abstraction. Kind of separated us from direct experience.
So on the one hand, writing expanded our mental capacities, but on the other hand, it created a distance between us and the world.
Right. It's a kind of trade-off.
An interesting one, for sure. And this whole idea of expansion and separation, it becomes even more pronounced with the invention of the alphabet. Davis connects this to Plato, specifically Plato's idea of the psyche ascending to the realm of forms.
The Platonic space shuttle, as Davis calls it.
Yeah, exactly. So he brings in David Porush, who argues that the alphabet's abstract nature, it actually paved the way for the concept of a monotheistic god. A god that's abstract.
I see.
But isn't it a bit, like, reductionist to say the alphabet alone caused this massive shift in religious thinking?
Of course. Like, historical shifts are never that simple.
Yeah.
But Parush's point is that the alphabet, it helped us think in more abstract terms, right? And that played a big role in how religious thought evolved.
Okay, that makes sense. It allowed us to conceive of a god beyond just concrete forms and images.
Right.
It makes me think about how language itself has been seen as having this mystical power, Davis actually delves into the Jewish mystical tradition.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and their view of the Hebrew alphabet is pretty amazing. They see it as this kind of cosmic DNA.
Oh, wow, I've heard of that. There's that line from the Sefer Yetzirah that says, hold on, I think I can remember it. God drew them, hewed them, combined them, waved them, interchanged them, and through them produced the whole creation and everything that is destined to be created.
Exactly. So it's like the letters themselves hold the blueprint for the entire universe.
It's powerful imagery.
Yeah.
And it's an idea that runs throughout Kabbalah, too, where they use letters for ecstatic meditation. Yeah. Figures like Abraham Abulafia, they believed by manipulating the letters, you could, like, unlock hidden spiritual power.
It reminds me of how some people view coding today, as this way to shape and control the digital world.
That's a really cool parallel. And this focus on the mystical power of the written word, it isn't limited to just Jewish mysticism either. Davis also points to how Christianity embraced texts.
Oh, yeah. In what way?
Well, they were way more passionate about it than, like, earlier pagan cultures. Think about how many texts early Christians produced and spread around.
It was huge, right?
Yeah, and for them, texts weren't just entertainment. They were, like, vital, as Harry Gamble puts it. They were the essential instruments of Christian life.
So from ancient myths to the rise of Christianity, the written word has shaped how we understand the world. But what happens when a new form of writing emerges? One based on, like, electricity.
Ooh, that's where things get really wild. The discovery of electricity, it sparked all this mystical speculation, what Davis calls the electromagnetic imaginary.
The electromagnetic imaginary. What does that even mean?
Well, thinkers started to see electricity as more than just a scientific thing. It was like this vital life force, a cosmic energy connecting everything.
It's like they were suddenly seeing the world in a whole new light. A light illuminated by electricity.
Yeah, exactly. And one figure who embodies this shift is Govinda, the Indian philosopher. He saw electricity as this, like, mirror of the vital force that animates both nature and our bodies.
So electricity kind of validated these ancient concepts by giving them this new, like, scientific grounding.
Precisely. And this blurring of lines between science, spirituality, and these unseen forces. It gets even more interesting with Franz Anton Mesmer.
Oh, Mesmer. The guy who gave us the word mesmerize, but wasn't he like a total fraud?
Well, his methods were definitely controversial. But what's fascinating is that his concept of animal magnetism, this subtle force you could use for healing, it actually has a lot in common with like traditional Chinese medicine and their ideas of energy.
So even though the scientific establishment laughed at him, he was tapping into something that ancient traditions already knew about. It makes you wonder how much of what we think we know is just shaped by our time and place in history.
Absolutely. And this back and forth between new discoveries and ancient wisdom, it keeps going with the invention of the telegraph.
The telegraph, how does that fit into all of this?
Well, Marshall McLuhan had this famous idea that the telegraph extended our central nervous system, like outside of our bodies, like outering our very nerves, creating this new sense of connection, but also some anxiety about it.
It's like opening a door to a new world. Exciting, but maybe a bit terrifying too.
Right, he said it really well. To put one's nerves outside is to initiate a situation, if not a concept of dread.
I like that. And this desire to connect, it didn't stop with the physical world, right?
No. The telegraph also fueled our desire to communicate with, well, the unseen world.
Leading to the rise of spiritualism.
Exactly.
So the desire to talk to the dead got like an electric boost. That's both fascinating and creepy.
It shows how technology can challenge our beliefs about reality, but also reinforce them.
For sure. It makes you think, what would those early spiritualists think about things like cyberspace and virtual reality?
Oh, absolutely. These technologies let us explore and maybe even transcend the limitations of the physical world in ways they couldn't have imagined.
It's like something out of science fiction, but it's real. And that's something to think about. So before, we were talking about cyberspace and virtual reality, creating those new spaces for the psyche to explore. And it made me think about the whole gnostic impulse that Davis talks about.
Yeah, that's a really interesting connection. Gnosticism, with its whole focus on knowledge being liberation and, that distrust of the material world, it actually has some interesting parallels with our modern obsession with technology.
Okay, so break that down for me a little. How does this gnostic impulse actually, like, show up in our tech-obsessed world?
Well, Davis brings up this concept called the metaphysical economy.
Metaphysical economy.
Yeah, it's this idea that information and abstraction are valued more than like actual physical stuff.
Okay.
Think about the stock market, right? Wealth is just these digital numbers fluctuating on a screen.
Yeah, it's true. It's all so abstract.
Right. It's almost like we're saying the tangible world is less important than this world of information.
So we're becoming more Gnostic without even realizing it.
That's a trend worth thinking about, for sure. And then you have this desire to transcend limitations, especially the limitations of the human body. And this is where you get movements like extropianism.
Extropianism. Aren't they the ones who want to upload their minds into computers and, like, live forever?
Yeah, that's kind of the simplified version.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, yeah, extropians believe technology can help us overcome all these human limitations. Disease, aging, even death.
Immortality through technology. That's a bold goal.
It is. And Davis discusses Hans Marabek, this AI researcher. He imagines transferring our consciousness into computers as a way to achieve, well, digital immortality.
Okay, but if we just reduce our consciousness to, like, data, what happens to the soul, the essence of who we are?
Those are some of the big questions Moravec's vision brings up.
Yeah.
What is this self? Can consciousness really be captured in a computer? What does it even mean to be human when technology blurs the lines between life and death?
That's kind of mind-blowing. And also a bit unsettling.
It is, and Davis explores both the utopian and dystopian sides of this potential future. He even brings up Gurdjieff.
Gurdjieff, wait, the mystic from the early 20th century. What does he have to do with technology?
Well, Gurdjieff had this idea of the man-machine, and it was actually pretty ahead of its time. He saw humans as this, collection of subsystems, kind of like a machine.
Which is like how cognitive science sees the mind now.
Exactly. But Gurdjieff also thought this man-machine was basically asleep, trapped in these habits and routines. He said we need to make a conscious effort to wake up, and reach our true potential.
So he recognized the machine-like parts of us, but also believed we could go beyond them through self-awareness and spiritual practice.
Right. And that idea of reprogramming the human biocomputer, it pops up again in other movements that were influenced by the counterculture of the 60s.
60s, LSD, cybernetics, the whole Earth catalog. That was a wild time.
I was. And Davis traces how that counterculture fascination with tech evolved. From the DIY ethos of the whole Earth catalog to, the cyberpunk aesthetic of Mondo 2000.
From back to the land communes to, cyberpunk hackers, that's a pretty big jump.
It is. But both movements were about challenging the norm, exploring different ways of being. The whole Earth catalog was about appropriate tech, tools for self-sufficiency. But then Mondo 2000, they saw technology as a way to hack reality itself.
So whether it's escaping societal rules or the limitations of our own perception, technology can be this tool for liberation.
Yeah. And both movements, they recognized that technology could expand consciousness, create new possibilities. A good example of that is Timothy Leary, the LSD advocate. He saw the brain as this biocomputer you could reprogram.
Oh yeah, Leary. Turn on, tune in, drop out. Wasn't his whole approach a little too, focused on the individual? Just personal liberation, not really changing society?
That's a good point. And Davis contrasts Leary's view with Gregory Bateson's idea of the ecology of mind. Bateson emphasized the interconnectedness of everything, the self, the body, the environment.
So it's not just about reprogramming ourselves, but understanding how we're all connected, how our actions affect the whole system.
Exactly. Bateson's work gives us a framework for dealing with this complex technological age. It's a reminder that what we do has ripple effects, way beyond what we can see.
It's like we're all nodes in this massive network, connected in ways we don't even realize. And speaking of networks, that kind of brings us back to the magic of technology. Remember the Ars Memoria, the ancient art of memory?
Oh, yeah. And Davis connects the rise of computer graphics and virtual environments to a renewed interest in that art, using visual images and spatial organization to improve your memory.
So you build this mental database using visual cues.
Yeah, exactly. It's a technique that goes back to the ancient Greeks, and then it had a revival in the Renaissance. And it's interesting how it relates to how we use digital environments today.
You mean the way we organize information in our minds is reflected in how we organize it on computers?
Right. And Davis takes it a step further. He talks about Alan Kay, a pioneer in computer interface design. Kay argued that magic and theater, those are better models for interfaces than just visual metaphors.
Wait, so instead of thinking of a computer screen like a desktop with files and folders, we should think of it as this magical space.
That was Kay's vision, to embrace that magical potential of tech instead of just reducing it to these everyday metaphors. And you can really see that magical potential in computer games.
Which Davis dives into quite a bit.
He does, from Dungeons and Dragons to those massive online games. He traces how fantasy has shaped how we experience those digital environments. The imagination, world building, creating these immersive experiences.
It makes you wonder if games are more than just escapism. Maybe they're training our imaginations, helping us explore new possibilities.
That's a cool thought. And those worlds, they're often full of apocalyptic themes, reflecting that anxiety about what technology might do to our future.
Right, the date apocalypse, the fear that tech will destroy us.
And Davis connects that fear to those millennialist beliefs, the idea that history is heading towards some kind of endpoint.
So it's not just about the tech itself, but our deeper anxieties about the future, and tech just amplifies them.
Exactly. And he explores those themes through Philip K. Dick and his Villi experiences.
Realize.
Yeah, those strange encounters Dick had with what he believes was this vast active living intelligence system. It sent him information and challenged everything he thought he knew about reality.
So like a cosmic internet.
You could see it that way. And Dick's work, like a lot of science fiction, it grapples with these big questions about technology. What is reality? What are the limits of knowledge? What happens to consciousness when we're so intertwined with machines?
It feels like we're standing on the edge of something huge, a future that's both exciting and terrifying, full of promise and danger.
And Davis suggests that to navigate that future, we need more than just technical skills. We need wisdom, good judgment, and that willingness to engage with those big questions. Who are we? Where are we going? What does it mean to be human in a world increasingly shaped by technology?
That's a lot to consider. So in the last part of our deep dive, we'll be looking at the concept of a global consciousness, emerging from this interconnected world we live in. Okay, so we've been on this journey through TechGnosis, exploring how technology and mysticism, they've always been kind of intertwined. Now, for this final part, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This idea of a global consciousness emerging from, well, our interconnected world.
Right, and to do that, Davis brings in the concept of the new sphere, a term coined by Teilhard de Chardin.
The new sphere, remind me, what exactly is that again?
So Teilhard de Chardin, he was a Jesuit priest and also a paleontologist, and he envisioned the new sphere as this next stage of evolution, kind of like a layer of consciousness forming around the planet, fueled by all our connections.
So the more we connect through communication technologies, the more our individual minds are like contributing to this larger intelligence. It sounds a bit like science fiction, to be honest.
It does, right. But think about it. Teilhard de Chardin came up with this idea before the internet even existed. And now, thinkers like Mark Pesce actually see the internet as evidence of the noosphere.
Wait, Pess, the VR guy, how does he connect the internet to the noosphere?
He sees the internet as the noosphere's nervous system. He even argues that the way the web has grown so rapidly, it's like a sign that the noosphere is waking up, becoming aware of itself.
Whoa, that's a pretty wild idea. But if this noosphere really is emerging, what does it mean for us as individuals, I mean? Are we just like cogs in some global machine?
That's where things get interesting. Davis says we can navigate this by what he calls the network path. It's a way of being that recognizes our interconnectedness. He also draws on older traditions, like Buddhism, to make sense of it.
So instead of getting lost in all this data, we need to develop some kind of like network consciousness,
Yeah,
awareness of how we're all linked.
exactly. Davis points to things like Indra's net, that Buddhist metaphor about everything being interconnected. He uses it as a way to understand the web of relationships that technology makes more and more visible.
I love that image, Indra's net, like we're all part of this giant tapestry.
Yeah, and recognizing that interconnectedness, cultivating wisdom and compassion, that's crucial, Davis says, to prevent the internet from becoming this new form of bondage.
So it's not enough to just be connected, right? We need to be connected consciously, ethically, aware of how our actions affect everyone else.
Absolutely. Technology, it can make the best of us better, but it can also make the worst of us worse. It's up to us to decide how we use it, how we shape this emerging network consciousness.
So much to think about. As we wrap up our deep dive into TechGnosis, what do you think is the most important thing for listeners to take away from all this?
I think Davis leaves us with this feeling of wonder and responsibility. We're living in this incredible time where technology is reshaping our world and our minds in these huge ways. The mystical impulse, that desire to transcend limitations, it's still there, but it's taking on new forms.
It's like we're all alchemists now, right? Mixing technology and consciousness, shaping the future with every click, with every swipe, with every post we share. Makes you think about what you put out there online, huh?
It really does. And if technology is this modern form of magic, like Davis suggests, then we need to be aware of the spells we're casting, as individuals and as a society.
That's a powerful thought. So as we move forward into this crazy digital world, let's remember that ancient wisdom, the power of being connected, and the responsibility we all have to make a future where technology helps us. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into TechGnosis. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Keep exploring those connections between technology, consciousness, and that search for meaning.